Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Surviving Out of Spite. My name is Samantha Sauer, and I'm your host. Today is a really cool episode. I sit down with a good friend of mine who is also a patient advocate and here on the board at G-PACT, Jim Sliney. We talk about storytelling and chronic illness and how to use your story and share your story authentically. We talk about how to craft your stories, how to resonate with audiences, and to really navigate the vulnerability and embrace our authentic selves in telling our patient's story. Jim will share some advice about overcoming the fear of being seen, maybe being a little afraid to tell parts of your story, kind of like I am sometimes, and how to really refine your story and get that out there to your audience in a way that is most impactful. Hi, Jim. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how you doing, Sam?
So for those of you that don't know Jim Sliney, but if you've been in this space for a while, you probably do. He's recently rejoined our board, and I'll give him a little time to introduce himself to those of you that don't know how awesome he is.
Oh, how awesome I am. All right, this will be short. Nice to meet everybody. I'm Jim. I've worked with G-PACT in the past, and then I went to the store, and I came back, and now I'm back on the board again. So thank you, Madam President, for allowing me back. I've been in patient care and clinical services for a really long time. And in that process, I learned a lot about the need for patients to tell their story. Not just their story, but like to express their voice, their concern. And I'm a writer by trade, so you mix that need for communication in with some literary structure, and there you go. You've got a storytelling guy, and that's me. So I've done this with students at Columbia University, all levels of graduate, undergraduate, as like a consultant on their writing projects. And every writing project is really a storytelling project, if you think about it. We'll loop back around to that. I'm really excited to be here and talk about writing about your story, crafting it, and why it's important.
Mm-hmm. Well, you do tell me often that I need to cut back on the amount of words that I use when sharing different things. And it's very helpful because you don't realize as a patient, there's so much stuff that you've had happen to you. And it's hard sometimes to determine like what is important and what is still important, but not necessarily to this conversation to get your point across. So trying to figure out what is that point that I'm trying to get across and what stories, what anecdotes, how do I put that in to get the most bang for my buck on sharing my story, that's not easy. It sounds very simple, but as someone who's still practicing that, it gets difficult to try to figure out because what I think is important isn't necessarily going to be the thing that the listener or the person I'm trying to, share my story with, that's not going to be the thing that hooks them. I think it's really good, and it doesn't always work that way. So having somebody like you to work through that as I sit here and use a lot of words as I'm explaining this, to get through that is helpful to narrow down, like, how do I do this most effectively?
Yeah. Well, that's the first thing people struggle with. A lot of people don't like telling their story, especially if they're asked for like an elevator pitch or something short. Because if you think about everything that you've been through as a patient, we're talking about volumes and volumes and volumes of information. So how do you tell that story? Well, the simple answer is you don't. I mean, I had to get over that hurdle myself, because I thought, like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to start writing, and when I'm done, I'll have like a tell-all autobiography. But that's not really what you need to do. When you're sharing your story with somebody, I feel like it's really important to know why you want to say something and to who you're going to say it. If I wanted to talk about some insurance issue, and I'm going to talk about that with other patient advocates, I'm going to talk about it a certain way. But if I want to talk to patients who might be new to struggling with their insurance, I'll have to change my approach. And if I'm going to be talking to lawmakers, that's yet another approach. So
Yeah.
kind of knowing who is going to be digesting your words that's the best way to cook them the verbal meal that they want to eat the most. That won't give them indigestion. We're going to go with this simile for a minute. Actually, no. The gastroparesis community knows what happens when something
Lots
goes
of
down that you don't
indigestion.
like. Yeah. But yeah, I've talked with a lot of rare disease patients who, they have a lot of frustration, and so when you give them the floor, it's like this purge. It's a very emotional moment. Like, I'm getting to say my piece.
Yep.
And so I've seen plenty of people at conferences and on panels and things like that get choked up, and there's a good reason for that. And it's even, when you think about the strategy of storytelling, it could be super effective. But a lot of people, if you start melting down, oh my God, I can't. Yeah, I did too. It's not really great communicating. I'm sorry for anybody that's happened to. I'm not mocking you, I swear.
Me, it's fine. I already cried on this podcast twice, but thank you.
Surviving out of spite has a reputation for a couple of things. I don't know if you know this. It's weeping openly and talking about poop a lot. Yeah.
Someone's got to talk about it.
It makes me super comfortable right out of the gate, though, because I know that there's pretty much nothing I can say that's worse than what's already been said.
No.
So what kind of challenges do you have when you're trying to tell your story? Think about the first time you got asked to do that versus what would you do now?
Man, there's one very specific moment that comes to mind for me, and it was, I believe it was as a representative of G-PACT to the DDNC, and talking about the medical food bill. That's what it was. And at the time, I had been on tube feeds for maybe a couple months, and we were trying to, convince this person why signing in favor of this bill was very important. And of course, they're like, okay, you can be the one to tell your story. And I'm like, shit,
yeah,
I don't know. So for me, I just looked at him and I was like, did you eat breakfast today? Yes. How was your breakfast today? Okay. He's looking at me like, the F is this chick talking about? And I'm like, what would happen if I just told you couldn't have breakfast today? That what you thought you were going to have, you can't have it anymore, and you no longer get your lunch. You don't get anything.
Nice hook.
That's basically what happens if you vote no on this medical food bill. Just because my medical food comes, in a little carton that I have to pour into a bag and go into my, small intestines, that's doing to you what this bill is doing to me, what I just said I was going to do to you. And it was in a moment where he looked at me and WTF, and then was like, oh, and then I got the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. But, that was an on the fly moment of this is how I have to tell my story. And it was very quick. I was able to get that in quickly. But as I've learned, especially doing the podcast here, that there are things that I want to share. And there's so many volumes of my life. There's so many instances that I can talk about. And as you know from working with me and knowing me for the last decade, that I feel anxiety in silence, and I feel the need to fill it. So that's where my problem comes in, is that it's kind of quiet, sitting there, and the conversation lulls a little bit. I'm like,
yeah.
So let me tell you this other really awkward story that has nothing to do with anything, and I'm just gonna keep talking, and you're like, Sam, shut up. So I get in a I don't know what to say. I've said my piece, and maybe it wasn't long enough, or it didn't impact you the way that I thought it would. And now I'm like, word vomit.
That's a really good point because word vomit. Yeah. I've seen it happen a lot. It's
or
happened
actual
to me
vomit, depending.
That can be a very impactful part of your story, too. If you throw up on your listener, you're leaving an impression.
You're not
Maybe
wrong.
not the one you wanted. No, but when the first time I went to Capitol Hill to do some legislative advocacy, the first meeting with the first legislator was the most awkward feeling I've ever had because, first of all, they're wearing suits. I'm not a suit guy, so I'm feeling like I'm other to them, and I give my relatively rehearsed pitch, try to customize it a little bit to make it a little folksy, and when I stop talking, nobody says anything. And I'm realizing, do I have like something on my face? Like, did I say a word in another language that offended somebody? What happened?
Yeah.
I had to learn to like get comfortable with the silence. Sometimes silence means you've actually forced someone to think or feel, and they're processing for a minute. And so it's okay to let there be a little bit of silence. It's not best practices on a podcast. I get that. But I'm sure if you say something like really serious to somebody and they're just looking you dead in the eye and their mouth hangs open a little bit, I'd say let it happen. Give them a few beats. You know, at some point you have to jump in and say, like, are you having a stroke? But, you know, give it a minute because we're so used to working so quickly. We digest all of our stories so fast and all the pacing of, you know, TikToks and Reels and all that stuff. That's not the way humans aren't really supposed to communicate like that. So lean into the silence sometimes. You know, when my first speaking gig where I had to kind of tell my story was it was really quite unexpected. I was working at Columbia University at the time, and my boss said, "Hey, there's this conference tomorrow of this rare disease community." So I was going to go, but now I'm not. So you're going to go in my place. I was
so like what you've done to me. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, you know the feeling. I had to make somebody else feel it, and why not you? You know. Yeah. So no, I was like, okay, what am I talking about? He said, I really haven't done any preparation, so I don't have slides, I don't have a topic, but you're going to go there, and you're going to. I believe in you. You're going to do great. And I had a choice in that moment. I could either freak out, or I could trick myself into thinking I knew what I was doing. I went with the second one, and it worked out. So I went and I gave the keynote address at this patient conference, a couple hundred people there. I mean, it was on a topic I understood, but the point is, it's not always about being extremely well prepared. It's about being your authentic self. Yeah. That's what people want to hear. You know, if I'm coming at you with notes and I'm clearly going like through an agenda, it loses some feel. You know, we gotta have a heart to heart, and that's what the key of storytelling really is. You, as a feeling, breathing, flawed human being, are trying to make a connection with another flawed human being. So if you polish it up too much, it feels performative. So be willing to make a mistake, you know, say the wrong thing and say, you know, oh, what I meant to say was blah, blah, blah. And that's all right. That's all right. And that hopefully takes some of the pressure off people when it's time to do that. The other thing that crosses my mind about that particular experience, oh, by the way, I had to speak for an hour with like no prep whatsoever. But no, I mean, once I got through that first experience, I actually started to like talking in front of groups of people. So you can break through that fear. Every podcaster has, like you have, Sam. I've known you a long time. I know that you've been kind of shy, not too interested in putting your face and voice out for the universe to see and hear, but you've gotten past it, and it's because you have a mission behind it.
Yeah.
It means something to you.
Yeah.
So that's another key to storytelling. It's got to mean something to you. If you feel no personal connection, if there's no stakes involved, it's easy to just like go in and goof off and leave and not really leave a lasting impression. But the whole point of storytelling is to leave some kind of impression. We don't always leave the one we anticipate, but you have to leave an impression.
Yeah. It's interesting just thinking about my own experience, even just doing this. And you're right. Like, I was never the person to volunteer to talk with something or put myself out there. Not because I didn't feel I had anything worth saying or I didn't want to. It's just like, it's not where I thrived. It's not where I was comfortable. And I'm still not completely comfortable. Like, I'm not in this space where I'm like, I'm good at this, so I have an easy flow. Like, I still have to work for it to be here. I'm just getting used to it. But it is true that, like, the main piece behind this was to build something for people and for myself too, looking at, like, where can I fill a void with my story, with this person's story, and get something out there for people. But there's the individual stories that go along in there that we've had to hone, develop. Like, what topic do we want to focus on? Do we want to have 75 topics, or do we want to really focus on like 1, 2, or 3? All 75 are great, right? So how do we narrow down exactly which one we want to use? And I think that that's what's difficult more for patients, because of all those things have been impactful for every single one. Like, even the seemingly insignificant things are still very impactful to your story. So going back to what you said in the beginning, like, are you talking to a lawmaker? Are you talking about just your patient's story? Is there one particular thing that you want to get across? Is it your success somewhere? Is it your, failures in something, or times that you fell down and you got back up? Is that what you want to get across? Or do you want to get across why this specific medical bill is very integral to your survival? You're not going to tell that same story. Maybe similarities and similar, like, pieces of the same story in each of those situations, but you're not going to give those speeches the same in each of those.
Yeah, the tone has to change. Because the thing you're trying to get across has emotional weight, usually, or it should have emotional weight. Otherwise, it's not going to really stick on the person. They've got to. You need to make them feel something. So that's why I say to people who are going to Capitol Hill, like, if you're going to be speaking to lawmakers, do a little research. Like, is this congressperson from, like, a military family? And do you have some way to tie that into the story that you're telling? Because they will automatically perk up. Yeah. Has there been a story that they have, like, a kid in their family who has a chronic illness or something? You can make that connection. You don't want to call out, HIPAA protected information, but you can say, I know that you can relate to this issue because I've read that, you have someone in your family who's also chronically ill. So you get it. And making those, when you're making that emotional appeal, one of the things I find at work that's really important is you have to care about the person you're talking to, even if you don't know them. There has to be, like, a little bit of human compassion involved in this, because that's how you decide, okay, I'm going to take this person on a short journey through this little piece of my story. I'm going to walk them through responsibly. I'm not putting them in, like, a haunted house and wishing them luck. And, they don't know which way they're going to turn. Is somebody going to jump out of the whatever? Unless I tell them right up front, this is going to be like a horror story. So I want to prepare them a little bit. But otherwise, I'm kind of sort of taking them by the hand and walking them through a thing that I've survived, for better or worse. And people seem to really appreciate that. They want to connect with the story that's being told to them. I had to give my dad's eulogy a bunch of years ago, and I was talking in front of family, people who knew him their entire lives. But I felt a lot of pressure because I wanted to represent him with honor and dignity.
Sure.
I also wanted to kind of pepper in some things that family members were going to go, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, he used to do that all the time. I tend to be a bit verbose, so it went on for about 40 minutes. But everyone was crying at the end, myself included, so I know I did something right.
Yeah.
Which simply means I conveyed some of his spirit into the story in a way that people really connected with. If I'm telling my own story, I try to do the same, although it's really, really different when you're telling your own story versus someone else's.
Yeah.
The stakes change. But
it's true.
But that's okay, because again, if you know why you're telling the story, if you're trying to make a point about your experience as a patient and the obstacles to getting access to quality care or insurance or something like that, if you know the purpose behind the story, it gives you something to anchor to.
Yeah.
There's something called a call to action. This is not a term that I really knew. I learned it from our mutual colleague, Joe, who speaks marketing language. I didn't really speak marketing language very much before I met him. But the call to action is the thing at the end of a story or paragraph that tells the reader what they should do next. Like, if you found meaning in this, make a donation to this charity to help support the work they do. Or inspired to tell your story? Click here and tell your story. So that's the call to action. Here's the thing you can do right now. It's sometimes easier to start with what is the call to action I'm going to end with, and then kind of like lower a rope from that. And your story is climbing back up the rope with the right kind of words hard. It's in here somewhere. Anecdotes. With the correct anecdotes, you make your way back up the rope and you get to your call to action. There's lots of different ways to look at it. I'm a very visual guy, so I tend to tell visual stories.
That reminds me of, like, I think it's the ASPCA commercials from, like, back in, like, mid to late 90s. And I forget the song that was playing. Song? Yes. That was animals, right? It was either animals or kids, whichever one. Maybe it was like, either way, it just it reminds me of that, because I distinctly remember the call to action at the end of that, where again it's like, if this, if this tugged at your heartstrings, like, here's the number to call, because back then it wasn't like click a link, it was like call a number and give, pay by check over the phone, right? So it's like thinking about that as you were talking, I could hear it, and I'm like, oh, I feel the reaction that I had to that commercial as a kid right now as you're talking about that. So it's true that type of push at the end is really important, because it gets somebody to do something. Like, maybe it's, think about what you said. Maybe that's the call to action, is like, if this hits you in a certain way, or if my story inspires you or touched you, whatever, do X, Y, or Z, for this. So it's just interesting. I was having like that, like, literal physiological reaction, like, man, I needed to donate to the ASPCA. Like,
totally. And that's why they did it at like 2:00 in the morning, because they knew they weren't going to be interrupting anything important. So people would be more likely to just like stop and make the call Like, so I don't learn how to make like a rotisserie chicken in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I can save this poor dog. Sarah McLachlan said I had to.
Yeah.
I
Or,
don't know
you
what
know,
happened to Sarah McLachlan.
I don't know. Or feed the children, all these things, like,
Oh yeah.
you know, it really, it does. It pulls at you. It gives you some reaction. Now somebody else might be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sick of this," and turn the TV channel. But that's not going to be everyone. Obviously, I was not one of those people. I was like, "Mom, I need the phone." Like, you know, trying I had that reaction, and I've had that reaction to some people telling their stories. And in the world now of like people doing, you know, videos, I've noticed that when people share a video with like a voiceover kind of telling their story as these videos are playing, you know, you might not hear them talk, there might be a song in the background, but they're talking, so I'm listening and I'm seeing their story. So it's like you're kind of getting a twofer on what I'm absorbing through their story. And because their story is being told in their voice, it's not me reading it where I hear my voice reading their story. I find those to be really impactful now in the way that people are sharing their stories on like social media nowadays, with it, whether it's TikTok or which I don't understand TikTok, but you know, Reels and Millennial. I live on Instagram in those spaces because it really, it's like I'm hearing you tell your story. So I hear the emotion coming from your voice. I'm not just reading it and assuming the emotion that I should feel by reading your story. So it's a different way of doing things now that we hadn't done, you know, in the same way 10 years ago.
Well, your story, the little bit that you share, you never know the effect it's going to have on somebody.
It's true.
It's like that a ripple in still water when there was no pebble tossed. There's so many ways to leave that impression. When I'm teaching people about writing, I usually, because I had like a good education or whatever, I get like snobby about it. So I'm like, you remember Aristotle and like pathos and logos and ethos? You have to kind of carry those with you into your story. You know, your pathos is making your emotional connection to the person listening to you. And your logos is making a logical connection, something that they can, building blocks that they can see fitting together. Statistics are good at that. 4 out of 5 people experience whatever. That helps people put an image in their head. But the other part is the ethos. Ethos is how you convince someone that they should listen to you. You have something important to say. So when I tell people, when I'm teaching people about story writing, I always tell them, start off by introducing yourself. Like when you gave me an opportunity to introduce myself, I could have said all kinds of things about I'm 58, I've done a lot of stuff. I could have talked about all sorts of things, but I only talked about the things that were relevant to this conversation. At least I think I did. So, like if you work with a nonprofit and you're going to talk to a legislator, mention the nonprofit. It gives you credibility. Say, I'm part of G-PACT, so you know that G-PACT has kind of vetted me, at least to some degree, and I'm not just talking out of my butt, you know.
Yeah.
So it's important to like establish yourself as an authority on the topic. And when you're talking, of course, about your own experiences, you're automatically the number one authority. It's
interesting as you say that too, because I think about like writing like my bio, right? So you have to have like a blurb. People ask for that all the time, especially, you know, in our world, you know, when you participate in something, they want your bio, a little like tagline or whatever. And I struggle with that so much. And I think that's actually a really good exercise of the start to storytelling, right? Or the start to putting what's important out there, to say like, my name is Samantha, I am a, Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Like, it's not right or wrong. It's just, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What's the second? What's the third? And like, I know with what audience I'm going to, which one might come first. But at the same time, that's as far as I go. I'm like, okay, so I'm this. Well, what else do I do, right? And that kind of goes into how you see yourself as a patient, as a person, for me, as a daughter, as a wife, as a friend, as a coworker, as a leader, as a, all of these different things. So it's like, how are you interpreting yourself? And then to kind of flip that back to put that out into the world, because you can't control how someone else is going to take your story. We've established that right in the very beginning, that what you think is going to impact them might not, and they might take something completely differently than how you intended it, which could be good or bad or neutral, right? It's hard to say. But to really focus in on that, to say what is important, like, who am I think is where I do struggle. Like, even here, I'm like, who am I here? What do I say here? What matters? Who gives a shit what I have to say, right?
Exactly.
Like, why are you listening to me? Please keep listening. But why do you, why do you listen to me? What am I saying? And I remember years ago when, like, I first got sick and I started posting on socials. It was just basically Facebook at the time. And I'm like talking about all these things about like what I'm doing, like what I was dealing with, all this stuff. And like slowly but surely I stopped doing that and started to kind of privatize all of that stuff. I don't put that out there. Here is a little bit different because, like you said, there's a mission behind the story. There's a reason that I'm here telling you certain bits and pieces of information. But like, going back to that and trying to say, what do I share here? Is this oversharing? Is this undersharing? And even now, as a person who's been in the chronic illness space for over a decade, I've been in the groups for over a decade, I've worked in patient advocacy to some degree for almost a decade, I still am like, do I want to share this? Like, who wants to read this? But then I remember the times that I would share something publicly somewhere and I would get a message from somebody. Could have been a stranger, could have been somebody that I hadn't talked with in a while, and they were like, thank you for sharing that. Or like, I needed that in that moment, like when I just logged in and I saw something and I was like, okay, like I needed to hear that. And that makes me want to do more, but I'm still so, I don't think self-conscious is the right word, but I'm still hesitant to share different pieces of my story because it's so dynamic and our audience is so dynamic that I'm like, how do you, and this is more of a rhetorical question, but like, how do you put the piece out there that makes the most sense, right? Like, because I never know. I want to share something. Like, when I had hysterectomy a couple years ago, I didn't share any of that. I didn't put anything out there. And then one day I'm like, there's something I want to say. So I type it up and I post it out there and people are like, wait, you went through what? And I'm just like, yeah, it was like 3 months ago or something, like I put that out there and then I had people messaging me for that exact reason. So it's like, I never know, again, when do I tell my story? When do I shut my mouth? And that's not even to stop me from rambling like I always do. It's just the appropriate time, because you never really know what's appropriate to you versus somebody else, or when to say something, when to hold back. That's a very difficult thing, I think, for a lot of people.
Such a good point. Like, when is telling my story about me? When is it about you? When is it about the person who's listening, right? When I do like long form writing, and again I have to credit my professors for this. You go into writing very selfishly. It's like turning on a tap. You have all these thoughts, these feelings, and you're trying to get them out of your head and onto, I'm old school, a piece of paper, right?
Hey, I like my pen and paper.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look at all this shit. But yeah, I mean, as you're getting this stuff out of you, that's the part of storytelling that belongs to you. But do not give that version of your storytelling to other people, because it's way too personal. It's cringe. Yeah. It's cringy, and if you did it right, you didn't hold anything back, and that's not for public consumption, right?
Yeah.
But that's what a good editor is for. And you can, of course, be your own editor, but as someone who's made money as an editor, hire an editor. But your editing process is about buffing those edges to soft edges, so that people aren't feeling like this is too personal, like I really shouldn't be listening to this. But instead, you've taken your experiences and you've made them relatable to other people who've probably had similar experiences. Not the same, but similar enough that they can relate to them. And that's when your story starts taking on a higher purpose. Your story is now for the good of society, or the good of your fellow chronic illness patients. Or it's for your doctor, to try to convince your doctor of the importance of a thing. You're essentially trying to change your listener. And you can really only do that with an intellectual connection, an emotional connection, and from a position of authority as a storyteller.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that you mentioned the doctor's office, because as much as I should have thought about it, like we mentioned, like maybe you're on a panel or speaking for lawmakers or sharing your story with friends, or maybe you're on a podcast, any of those things, didn't mention doctor. And it's really true that this type of, you know, how do I tailor my story to my audience? Like that's a perfect example of, like, yes, they do need to know a lot of the information, right? They need to know the symptoms, and they need to know when it happened, and they need to know certain things that you're not going to share in other places. But we all know, anybody listening who has a chronic illness and has gone to the doctor knows that what we deem important is still important, but doesn't need to come up in that appointment. And if you go in there without any sort of plan or a list of topics, symptoms, you know, that your top priority things to talk about, and you word vomit all over your doctor, they could be the best doctor in the world. You could love that doctor, have a great relationship with them. That appointment is probably not going to go very well. So it's a good practice to in a slightly unconventional way of looking at storytelling, that the doctor's office, the medical professionals, the people that you are relying on to hear, believe, and understand your story also really need to have I don't want to say the best version of your story, but the best version of your story that you can tell, for them to absorb it and say, yes, that's very important. That, you know, those symptoms, I'm glad you tracked that, etc. Or yes, I did need to know that information. And then maybe they have questions for you. But if you go in and blah, 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 all over them, which we all want to do, I've done it, we've all done it, it's understandable because we're frustrated and there's a lot of shit going on all the time. That's not actually the place to do it. You think it's the place to do it, but it's not the place to do it, because you want them to absorb, understand, and react. And they can't do that if you bury them in vomit. Word or otherwise.
You know, you're trying to make yourself seem super authentic and convey how important this is to you. But to the other person, that's not how it's coming off. It's coming off like, you realize that I'm like trying to help you here. Like, I want to be on your side, but what does this have to do with, like, your niece's bar mitzvah, like, what, or bat mitzvah, excuse me. What's the through line here? What am I? What is my call to action? What am I supposed to do at the end of this? And are you actually walking me step by step through an important narrative, or are you just like getting your frustrations out? Because get your frustrations out in front of the mirror. I know people who make like voice memos. Like, they'll just talk into their phone, record it, and usually never listen to it, probably just dump them later. But you got to get that stuff out of you, right? And if you get it out of yourself before you're on the spot, then you're much more likely. Well, see, the other thing too is as you're getting this stuff out of you, you're learning a lot about yourself. You're learning about the things that make you sad or frustrated or angry, or what are the things you cling on to that make you happy.
Yep.
Everybody has these things, but first you've got to puke it out of your head. We can just keep using vomit analogies.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, you have to sort through it to find like the fruity pebbles and the corn and whatever. The things that you're going to need to make an effective story afterwards.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing you want to convey. You know, like you said, you don't want to word vomit on somebody. You want to give somebody what I call the golden thread. The thing and all of that, expression that you do on your own time, that golden thread is the thing that you can pull out that's going to connect you to another human being when you share it.
Yeah.
That's so important. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big proponent of getting things out to get them out. Like, that has been something that I've done for years, to whether it's, to a friend, to Adam, to, even in some situations to the doctor, but I do need to get it out in order to get through it, whether that's just releasing it if it's a stressor and it's something that like I need to get through this first in order to get to the important pieces, or I need to just kind of move through the mess so I can organize it a little bit better, because once it's out, it's easier for me to be like, okay, where do I start? What do I do? Especially when I'm going into something that has to do with my health, where it is very, very, very important that I have all my ducks in a row to the best of my ability. And if I don't have that, I'm not setting myself up for the success that I need at the doctor's office. And if you cannot do that, if this is something that you are struggling with, this is something that we here at G-PACT understand and are working on to help you with. So that is my very not so very obvious thing to share, that things are coming on programs that we are building to help you through all of these situations, because we want you to be good at this. We want you to have the care that you need. We want you to be able to tell your story as effectively as possible in any situation that you want to tell it in, even if it's just like, hey, I am Samantha, I have gastroparesis, and this is what I need to tell you. If that's all you need to do, we want you to be able to do that really well. So if you had one last piece of advice to give somebody who is either trying to relearn how to share their story or are starting from scratch, what would be like your last or best piece of advice that we want to give them?
Well, we talked about purging your mind of all of your trauma, your stress, your thoughts, your feelings. My personal belief is the best way to do that is journaling. If you can sit down and either type, or I feel like there's something
Writing
really that connects in the brain when you sit and write in a book.
Yep.
Write your thoughts. Don't care about grammar. Don't use punctuation. You don't even have to be able to read it afterwards. But use that process, because you're engaging different parts of your brain when you do that. And as you do that, it's the best way to learn about yourself. And you can't be a good storyteller unless you know yourself fairly well. That's my best piece of advice.
Good piece of advice. That's why I asked. Well,
It's almost like you had that question prepared.
Almost like I did. I plead the fifth. Thank you for joining us today
You're welcome.
and sharing all these fun tools that I've had the pleasure of learning from you over the years, and still trying to get it stuck into my brain here. But we get there. It's learning your how to tell your story, especially as it's continuing. Also makes it, when you're like, I've got 16 volumes and now that I can work through, and now all of a sudden there's 19, and then there's 20, and then there's 21, and you're like, I just figured out how to pare these 16 down to 8. Now you got like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more to come in. So it's a process. It's a process.
The story keeps growing every day, every minute. Doing this podcast is going to be part of my story at some point. So, yeah, just keep track of all these things, and don't be afraid to share with somebody. Especially someone, and if you're unsure, like, share with somebody that actually likes you, who can give you honest feedback. That's always, my wife is my sounding board for everything, and
Mine too.
She can be very, my wife is your sounding board? That's so cool. She gives very honest feedback.
She does.
She's a badass.
She's pretty awesome. She's pretty awesome.
I agree. See, that's on the record now. Well, thanks for having me, Sam. This is really cool. I'll come back anytime and talk about whatever you want. I believe in the mission here, so we'll give the people what they need.
Yeah, and thank you for signing yourself up for more work.
It's a pathology.
Thanks, everyone. If you have any questions about storytelling or for Jim or myself, leave them in the comments and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. Peace out, everybody. Okay, I'm gonna talk to the people for a second. Excuse me. Hi,
Go.
I'm Jim. I want to talk to you about storytelling. If you have a story to tell and you're unsure how to tell it, let's do a webinar. Let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk about how to tell your story so that you feel more confident, so that you can go into it with a call to action in mind. Let's get really good at this, because telling your story is how we change the world. One story at a time, one person at a time. So reach out. We'll put a class together. It'll be awesome. Thanks. Okay, that was my pitch.